Big SUV relinquishes V6 engine as Italian luxury brand initiates electric transition. Electric cars can struggle to excite enthusiasts, so Maserati has used some powerful imagery to sell its inaugural crop of EVs, Lightning, or Folgore if you're Italian. The first of them to arrive is the Maserati Grecale Folgore, a large 4.8 meters long SUV that has been on sale here in V6 and 4-cylinder turbo petrol forms and viewed with tempered admiration by Autocar since 2022. There's a lot of weight on its broad shoulders, not just because it sets the tone for the Italian luxury brand switch to electric power, but also because it will be the volume seller, well, at least relative to the Maserati Gran Turismo Folgore Coupe and Gran Cabrio Folgore Soft Top. That might be why, unlike the standard Maserati Grecale, which was very late to the D-segment SUV party, the Grecale Folgore has arrived a little more promptly to fight it out with the Mercedes-Benz E-SUV, Porsche Macan Electric, Audi Q6 e-tron, and Genesis electrified GV70. Design and styling. You will need a keen spotter's eye to distinguish the Folgore from the standard Grecale, as it retains the typical Maserati styling hues of the oval grille and portholes on the side, although the latter have turned into lights rather than vents. The easiest way to spot the E is the absence of exhaust pipes, the subtly redesigned bumpers, and the unique but optional 21-inch wheels. Unlike the Gran Turismo, which uses a bespoke platform to underpin both the 800 volts E and ICE versions, the Grecale makes do with what is effectively a radical reworking of the Giorgio platform that was developed for the Alfa Romeo Giulia and Alfa Romeo Stelvio. The engineers have managed to fit the battery in under the floor though, and it's a big one, too, 105 kilowatt-hours, of which 97 kilowatt-hours is usable. It feeds to the 75 bhp electric motors for a total of 550 bhp. Worryingly, however, they're not very efficient to 6 mph WLTP, which means that Grecale really needs that massive battery to still have a respectable range figure. No, a WLTP range of 311 miles isn't bad, but it's very slightly less than what the Tesla Model Y Performance gets out of a much smaller 75 kilowatt-hours battery. As a result, while the Tesla, which is admittedly a smaller car, weighs 1,986 kilograms, the Maserati weighs a planetary 2,480 kilograms. The Q6 e-tron, which has a 100 kilowatt-hours battery, weighs 2,350 kilograms. Interior. Inside, it's largely the same as the petrol Grecale, so we won't repeat everything here. As in that car, it's restrained and luxurious, but with a mix of some very pleasing materials, interspersed with some very disappointing ones. Where the Folgore differs is that leather is no longer your only material choice. You can spec your electric Maserati with a mix of artificial leather and Econil, which is a type of nylon made from old fishing nets and fabric scraps otherwise destined for landfill. It's really quite nice to the touch and still manages to look the part. Space-wise, the interior isn't notably compromised. You lose the space under the boot floor, and there's still a center tunnel, but the floor isn't uncomfortably high and doesn't have any strange lumps in it. A 535-liter boot is quite impressive, but under that long bonnet hides only disappointment. There's no front. Engines and performance. With those twin motors and a combined power output of 550 bhp, the Folgore is the most powerful Grecale you can buy. And while it's not quite as quick in a straight line as the V6 Grecale Trofeo, it's still jolly quick, needing just 1 sec to reach 62 miles per hour. The power is reasonably progressive and easy to mete out, but even in a straight line, it feels like too much for the chassis to handle. Put your foot down at low speeds, and the front wheels will scrabble as the nose rises up and unloads them. You also need a firm grip on the wheel to stay in your lane, because the Grecale Folgore torque steers like a hot hatch on the rowdier end of the spectrum. Maserati has fitted synthesized engine noise to the Grecale Folgore because every Maserati must make noise. This worried us, having been annoyed by the Abarth 500e speaker, but thankfully there's none of that monotonous fake combustion noise here. Instead, the Grecale Folgore sounds a lot like any other Eve, but the noise varies in intensity and volume in reaction to how you're driving. You can't turn it off, but it's pleasantly subtle and fades into the background at speed. The Folgore retains the large metal steering wheel paddles from the petrol versions. Of course, there's no more gearbox to shift. Instead, they now control the regenerative braking. The Regan can be adjusted between a freewheeling mode and one where it slows you down quite strongly. Even in that strongest mode, it's easy to control and drive the car smoothly. There's no true one-pedal mode, however, you always need the brake pedal to come to a complete stop. Thankfully, then, the brake feel is good and easy to modulate whether you're about town or on a faster route. Ride and handling. Adaptive air suspension comes as standard on the Grecale Folgore and has been specially tweaked to make up for the weight of the battery. We're not convinced that Maserati has done enough, however. In the comfort-oriented modes, there's noticeable float and wallow to the body control, despite higher frequency intrusions still sending shivers and thumps into the cabin via the standard 20-inch alloys wheels and Bridgestone Potenza rubber. Sport and Corsa modes tighten up the body control, but don't solve the heave and head toss, meaning that the Grecale feels too softly sprung yet too harshly damped regardless of which mode you choose. This is all subtle enough that it may not be a deal breaker if you've really fallen for the Grecale Folgore's slick looks, big pace and useful interior space. But the Lotus Eletre or the granted, slightly smaller Porsche Macan are both far better to drive. The steering is very typical of Maserati, light, with lovely progression, but without the feedback and texture that you want, and it feels overly light and disconnected when the car is weighted up mid-corner. Basically, the Grecale seems to have all the inertia of a heavy car, but none of the poise that comes from a low center of gravity. It's fast, and it's confident enough at a normal canter, which is likely to be all that it really needs to be. But in any more testing driving than that, you simply don't have much confidence in the chassis, and we'd say that's a problem in such an accelerative car. Not that there's much nuance to the handling, anyway. The front and rear motors are identical, and there's not much in the way of clever torque distribution going on, so it always feels predominantly front-driven. MPG and running costs. With a starting price of £99,165, the Grecale Folgore is more expensive than most rivals. The Macan Turbo and SQ6 e-tron both stay the right side of £100,000, and we would recommend the usefully cheaper and more sensibly powered versions of those cars anyway. That's not an option with the Maserati. It's 550 bhp or nothing.